company modifies the weather in Plumas County. And so you could bet that PG&E was going to enhance the snowpack in Plumas County and make a fortune. People that didn't know this would lose money. But all of these weather modification programs are well known. It means that I could hire a company right now without public consent or even knowledge. I could hire a company to enhance the snow in at some place, location, in a county and a state in California, for example, and then I can also bet on it because it's legal to bet in the futures market on the weather. And so I could actually change the weather by hiring a weather modification company and then legally bet on the fact that I was going to enhance the snowpack, for example.
This is extremely disturbing. So we have a system in place in the United States that basically big corporates can set themselves up to make millions of dollars on betting on the weather.
That's correct, and NASA lists and NOAA lists a lot of weather modification programs. I mean, I have a whole list of 66 of them on the weather modification section of my website, and it tells you who's going to modify the weather. It tells you whether they're going to enhance the snow or the rain, fall in a certain area. It gives you the location. All I have to do is call up the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and put my bets in. Based on these programs.
Okay,
this is going to encourage other people to hire weather modification companies so that they can bet on the market and bet on a sure thing.
I'm blown away by this, Rosalind. It's disturbing. I mean, we know that the stock exchange is corrupt, but to be able to do it this way is beyond. I'm going crazy with some of this stuff. Now,
Well, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange has taken the position that weather is randomized. And see, what happens is that most people do not know. I mean, insiders know, but most people do not know that a lot of our weather is not random. A lot of our weather is produced by, and here in the United States as one example, is produced by the weather modification programs that happen in those areas. So you have a built-in system in which your meteorologist and your weathermen that give you the day's forecast will never tell you that your weather has just been enhanced by a weather modification program. However, insiders would know immediately that they could go and bet on these programs because they're public record.
All right, we'll move on to the honeybee decline, Rosalind. In 2009, I witnessed a plane spraying low and direct over our town in early spring. I'm a gardener, so my leafy green vegetables were left with a white residue that I couldn't wash off. All right, I noticed within the next week that the aphids disappeared, and bees started turning up everywhere. They were all over the concrete and the gutters. I took the issue up with our local mayor, which prompted him to start letter writing to the government. He was greeted with the official government cover-up from, New Zealand's Minister of Environment, Dr. Nick Smith, who went into defence mode and handled all persistent contrail responses to his secretary, distancing himself from the barrage of awakening. So there's many theories as to the sharp bee decline. Perhaps you could elaborate on what you know about this direct attack on our natural food sources. I know that the Agricultural Defence Coalition has extensive documentation on this subject, and the links are being posted in chat.
Yes, honeybee decline worries me because honeybees and other pollinators are responsible for almost 2/3 of our food supply worldwide, not including flowers, and that's not including herbs and other things that we take for granted. If we lose our honeybees, we will be down to just those crops that are not pollinated, so we will lose a lot of our fruits and our vegetables, and other type crops. We will lose a lot of our spices. There's all kinds of things that we will lose without our pollinators. What concerns me is three things. The GMO crops that are proliferating now across the United States and the world, promoted by the United States government to a great extent, even under President Obama, it's a growing commodity. And many of our honeybee producers will not put their honeybees into areas where these genetically modified crops exist because their honeybee decline starts to increase when their honeybees are in these areas. In addition, we have neonicotinoids. Bayer Crop Science, a company, one of the largest chemical manufacturers, has a new chemical out called a neonicotinoid. And we do know from reading just their own label, Bayer's label, that this chemical is toxic to honeybee larvae. And we do know that these chemicals are toxic to other things besides honeybees. But one of the things that we do know is in areas where this neonicotinoid has been sprayed, either here or in other countries, is that there has been a sharp decline in honeybees. So we really feel that between the GMO foods, that between the chemicals that we're using in the atmosphere for upper atmospheric testing, many of them using rockets, and we do know that that the pesticides, herbicides, insecticides are all taking their toll on these honeybees. And we're losing ours here in California and across the United States. They have taken another nosedive in the last year. And so now where we used to have a lot of honeybees in the wild and native, those are disappearing as well.
Very disturbing. We've watched our crops decline here, although it hasn't become apparent to the average Joe yet. I know what's happening with our bugs here, and it's almost too much to take, And Rosalind, can we really call ourselves organic farmers any longer with these metals and pesticides being sprayed in our skies and all over our food?
It's beginning to be harder and harder to declare that we're organic, only because some of the atmospheric testing that we're exposed to from rocket programs, actually, like aluminum, barium, manganese, magnesium, strontium, lithium, and a whole host of other chemicals like aluminum oxide or trimethyl aluminum, which even the Air Force and the United States Navy is releasing via rockets, that it's contaminating our air, our soils, and our water at an alarming rate. And this concerns me because it's very hard to be organic when you're being exposed to a lot of toxic chemicals that are arriving from upper atmospheric testing.
Correct, and then these metals and toxins are in our water. We're watering our plants with this. They're in the soil, and then we're consuming them. It's certainly a huge issue. When the mainstream people wake up to this, at the moment we're seeing high incidences, for instance, of Alzheimer's. There's several diseases. We've got Lyme's disease, which we're beginning to see is a direct relation to these aerosol spraying programs. Really, really must stop.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. And I do want to say that in California, where we are, we're in part of the breadbasket of the entire state. And with the jets leaving these persistent contrails, which stay up for days on end, where we don't get direct sunlight, we can already see the impact in lower crop production. Because of the lack of photosynthesis, the plants just don't have the energy to grow the crops. So we're seeing, besides the chemicals, we're seeing a tremendous impact on just the lack of photosynthesis. We're seeing a decline in tree health. We're also seeing, for example, our farmers markets, where many people locally get together to sell their goods, are beginning to decline, and their numbers are dropping quickly because backyard gardens and small gardens are not producing. This year in May, for example, I planted several crops. There have been no zucchini this year, limited amount of crooked neck squash, and the tomato crops, which usually produce, we plant in May, and usually we are producing tomatoes by the end of May, and there was no red tomatoes on the vine until about a week ago. So this is highly unusual, and everyone is feeling the same impacts. There is no doubt that this is having a tremendous impact. So when you add the man-made cloud cover that we're seeing all the time, the lack of photosynthesis, when we're seeing the honeybee decline, when we're also seeing, in other words, a wide variety of programs where particles and chemicals are changing the pH of the soil, like aluminum, we're beginning to feel the impacts of all these different things, and it would be very hard to maintain any type of long-term crop production because of these impacts.
Rosalind, what you were saying regarding tomatoes, for instance, that was the first thing I noticed. Prior to the quakes and then after the quakes, we were having intense chemtrailing, intense chemicals, to the point where I was fainting. Now, the first thing to tip over in my garden were the tomatoes. I can happily grow cherry tomatoes, and I even had them through winter last year, but this year my tomatoes tipped over, and I understand from a gardening point of view that the tomatoes are the things that do not like chemicals at all. So this was a big sign for me. It's very disturbing to hear you're not getting zucchinis. These are, these grow prolifically, and the California being a growing area, just like we are here, this is extremely troubling. We're heading for famine. How are we going to feed? Well, how are we going to feed America, much less the rest of the world? You're very, very reliant now on exporting much of your food.
Well, but see, what most people don't know about the United States is we've had such disruptions in weather and lower crop production, plus the fact that we're taking a lot of our food production and turning it into gasoline for gasoline tanks and cars. And what this is doing is